There are many mountains on the globe, places where the Earth's surface thrusts upward abruptly. There are stunning summits and points that have become landmarks for various peoples and cultures. Mountains have been sites of worship, of reverence, and of awe.
I have been to many of these mountains. I have experienced the grandeur and beauty some have to offer, but for me there is truly only one place, only one mountain. Appropriately then, all of my life, I have called this place simply the mountain. Just off US Highway 6 between Spanish Fork and Price, Utah, after driving through the Red Narrows in the place where the valley opens up again and tense drivers let out an easy breath of air, one can notice a small sign pointing to the little town of Schofield, Utah. Turning off the highway and heading in this direction, it does not take long to reach the mountain.
When my father was almost 100 years old and I was with him at his home, he would get up in the morning and I'd say, "What should we do today, Daddy?" And he'd say, "Let's go to the mountain."
Part of the regal and rugged Wasatch Mountain Range, the mountain is as majestic as any other in the western half of the country. Its peaks gleam white in the winter, its valleys are deep and shadowed by large pines. Cool, fresh springs dot its surface, and sandstone boulders crop out in places.
Henry David Thoreau once said, "I believe that water is the only drink for wise men." Be that the case, we all could probably do with a couple of drinks from Miller's Spring. As a child, I believed that the water trickling from the ground in Miller Canyon was the best and coldest water in the world. As an adult, a senior, I still do. So cold and so refreshing that it is difficult to get more than one gulp of the pure liquid down without taking a deep breath. Hanging next to the spring, passers-by can always find a rusty white tin cup dangling by its handle from an old bent wire. The saying goes that if you can fill the cup with spring water and then drink it all in one gulp, you may keep the cup. It has hung there my entire life, and I hope it always will.
I'm just going to take a little bit more time. It's not a story about my father, but about a man who has been in the sheep business a long time. He's 97 years old. His name is Vern Wilson, and he's in the Veterans Home in Payson. Now, his mind is sharp, his memory is sharp, but his eyesight is gone. And so I've spent a few times in there to visit him. He's so glad to see somebody. The last time I was in there, he gave me his history to read, and it has a couple of interesting stories in it that I'd like to tell you. Vern's range, he started in the sheep business in 1957. He was out here as a boy. His father and grandfather were in the sheep business. They were in the sheep business, out of the sheep business. Depression came along, changed a lot of things for them, but in 1957, he got back in the sheep business, and he built an outfit in Pine Valley until he had about 10,000 head of sheep, one of probably the biggest outfits in Utah. And he put that together over time, and he's been proud of it. He's no longer in the sheep business. If you know the name of Oscar Thorpe's, they're running mostly on his ground. But he ran in Pine Valley, and I'm going to list the places that he ran because it's quite an impressive list. So hang on a second. He bought, there were some Robertsons from down in Sanpete County. He bought their ground out in Tinnick, but he bought permits on Riverbed, Keg Mountain, the Crickets, Dugway, Hatchland and Livestock, and the private ground from Robertson's west of Eureka, private ground in Soldier Summit, and ranch property west of Payson, and several sections of state land north of Alberta, west of Utah Lake, along with other parcels such as Broad Canyon, Jericho, Cedar Valley, comprising some 740 sections. So you can see he put together quite a sizable outfit. But there's a couple of stories in here that I would like to tell that he included. One is called Loyal Dogs. I pride myself in being a livestock man like my father. I have built my business from practically nothing to the largest sheep operation in the state. I believe in having good vehicles to support my operation. I do a lot of driving, and I try to replace my trucks every other year. Good horses and dogs are an absolute necessity to a successful sheep operation. My horses were 7-Up, Midnight, and Buck. Through all the years, I honored my dogs by naming them Tippy. I like border collies. Sometimes I had more than one dog named Tippy, so I called them Big Tippy and Little Tippy. My sons refused to let me name my last dog Tippy, so I called him Bob. Around my family, but when we were alone, his name was Tippy. And that's a pretty good example. He has a good sense of humor. He told this story about his grandpa. Let's see if I can find it without dropping all my papers here. And some of you can relate to this. As you know, our fathers and grandparents were good storytellers. And this is one that Vern passed on that his grandpa told to him. Grandpa entertained us with other humorous stories. He tried in his way to fill a void in our lives on the farm. One of my favorites follows. It was common in the early days of the West to make one bullet do as much as possible because ammunition for the guns was very expensive. One day, Grandpa set out hunting with just one bullet in his gun. That was all he had, and he had to make it count. He hadn't gone far when he chanced upon a little meadow surrounded by trees. It was a beautiful meadow with a stream flowing through it with plenty of game available. As he peeked around a stand of quaking aspen, being very careful not to make any noise because the trees were dressed in their fall attire and some of the leaves had dried and fallen, he spied a 4-point buck standing about 50 yards away. He was downwind and the deer could not see him, nor could the deer smell him. Grandpa knew that if he went around the little stand of quakies that concealed him, he would frighten the deer and possibly ruining the opportunity of bagging more game with the one bullet he had. He waited until the time was right. Things were lined up just as he wanted them. He took action. Knowing he could not show himself, he bent the barrel of his trusty .30-30 over his knee to form a semicircle and took careful aim around the corner of the trees. He had waited until everything was lined up for maximum yield of game. His father's name was James B. Wilson. JB fired at just the right moment to catch everything just as he had planned. He was an expert shot with any gun, particularly with his trusty .30-30, and for this shot, everything had to be perfect. The bullet was fired so that it just nicked the neck of the 4-point buck standing in the meadow, rendering it unconscious. It passed through the deer and did the same thing to a young grizzly bear that was by design just passing behind the deer. The bullet passed through the bear, also rendering it unconscious. It hit the rim of a tree of the shore of the stream that flowed through the small meadow. Grandpa noticed from his vantage point from behind the grove of trees that the 4 pheasants roosting on a limb did not fly at the sound of the rifle shot. He knew at this time that the final purpose for his waiting for the precise moment to fire the shot had been successful. After cutting the throats of the unconscious bear and deer, Grandpa climbed the tree to retrieve the pheasants roosting on the limb. He found, as he had calculated, that the carefully aimed bullet had split the limb on which the pheasants were roosting, and they had gotten their feet caught in the split. The limb had been weakened by the damage of the bullet, and just as Grandpa had retrieved the last bird, the limb split and Grandpa fell into the stream below. As he climbed out onto the bank, he found that so many fish had swam into his coat that it stretched so tight that the button popped off and killed a passing rabbit. he felt the hunt was a little better than average for a rather chilly autumn day.